Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing to the channel or becoming a patron at patreon.com/Afterlife Topics. Hello everybody, this is your host Cyrus, and on today's video we're going to discuss the nature of age regression on the other side, a topic I'm sure I've brought up in the past, but now because I have this very strong and very objective communication with a spirit being using my copper dowsing rods. You guys watching the channel know what this is all about. I always like to fill in possible new subscribers. Basically, I'm able to obtain objective information through spelling words out using basically just speaking an alphabet and seeing which letters the rods correspond to. It takes a long time, but I'm able to get whole answers, whole sentences, even whole paragraphs if I spend a long time at it. And essentially, I get objective info, so recipes in Hindi or Tamil, foods, exotic foods, words in Turkish, information that I had no awareness of, and of course, a lot of information about my communicator, who describes herself as one of my spirit guides, who has the ability to be synchronized to my thoughts. And so if you want to see examples of this, see the prior videos, the ones I've put up since May, where I even do some live demonstrations of using these. Are they always accurate? No. I've had interference happening with other outside entities hijacking the conversations, and I've had also false positives and times where it just didn't work. So I can't guarantee that this is not some infallible thing that we should worship as a religion. That's what people do in these new age fields, in these spiritual communities, is let's take this as religion. And what I like about my guide is this is something that she herself rails against. It's like, let's stop treating everything like a religion, but we can talk about things people experience, what we report happens, at least to many of us. There's always room for variables. With that said, let's go ahead and begin the subject. So, first of all, we are going by the presupposition that this is something that has been seen in many out-of-body experiences, many near-death experiences, that when you get over to that side, you're still in what is basically a replicated body, known about, I think, throughout pop culture as this duplicate body, that you die, you go to heaven, but obviously your body is still here, so you're given a new body. But as we go deeper into these subjects, we know that this is an element of not fully understood physics about how this happens, how matter on this side basically gets replicated in different dimensions. So we have to go by that assumption, because this is a cornerstone of most research into the other side that's objective. Still today, if you go on different forums, different other YouTube channels, or different books in the New Age or spirituality aisles, or theologians, the near-death experience groups, you'll have people who proselytize that we have no bodies, we have no desire, we have no emotions, we have no personality, we die, we merge with the great Godhead, and that is all that the other side is that this dualistic perception that we have a physical life here and then we merge and we give up our individualities. And this is to me, as my rods spell out, this is just theology. And if somebody really wants to go on that path, they may find it. But what happens to the majority of people when they cross over is they end up in a replica environment, which is to say a higher dimensional version of the world we're in now. So when you go on to NDERF, when you read near-death experiences, somebody ends up in a beautiful meadow. This is a beautiful meadow in the astral world. I mean, there's beautiful meadows in this world. Things are carrying into that side, and it's just as vast as this world, probably much more so. So I like to remind all these things so we can stay with what I think is an accurate perception of this material. Before I began having my own out-of-body experiences, astral projection trips, and now concrete objective spirit communication, I took more seriously these, a lot of this, what I can now consider to be predominantly misinformation, saying we don't have bodies. and none of the things that I talk about are possible. It's all of the flesh. It must be transcended. Now I see those interpretations as being what they really are, which are typically religious convictions, ideas, thought, theological thought, from different creeds and backgrounds, from the east to the west, and it's leaking its way, percolating down into studies of objective experiences, because it's a way to push agendas. And it's also true that many people with strong beliefs a certain way are given or shown or have experiences in realms that confirm those biases over and over again. I know I'm ranting a little bit, but because we're talking about the subject of bodies, astral bodies, ethereal bodies, I think it's necessary to go over all these things first. So on to what the rods told me about this subject doing a communication, again with Laurina. My question was this, and this relates to an astral experience I had just a couple nights ago. Question: I saw my mother and my mother's side of the family, including my grandmother Lila, whom I never met on this side. And so I met them at this kind of reunion, astral reunion, a couple nights ago, and it was a little bit awkward. There was not everybody was getting along famously, but I was happy to attend and see what some of them looked like, what they were all about, and also happy to see my mother finally reconnecting with her family on that side, which I've encouraged her to do because she's been crossed over a long time now. Well, a few years now, since 2016, but she's been pretty tepid about getting back in touch with her family because of a lot of old bad blood. And this goes to show you how much stuff just carries over from this side. So anyway, so my issue is they all looked kind of old, my grandmother, I think, passed in her 90s, but she probably looked in her 70s and she had a cane. My mother passed in her 70s. She usually looks about in her 50s these days. So everyone else had gray hair. My mother had dark hair. Still, my grandmother seemed nice and energetic. But also, even my living brother was there, but he always looks about 18 or 19. He's in his 40s, and so he's actually asleep on this side, projecting, and sometimes I meet up with him. I don't bring it up in real life because, honestly, I think he's sensitive about these subjects, or he might even call me a weirdo. So, I mean, if he is having memories of experiences with me, he would interpret them probably as dreams. Even though he has a background, he used to do the out-of-body stuff. If you read my books, I tell the whole story. He kind of, I don't know, I think he dropped out of a lot of those ideas or teachings or practices. But I do think I meet up with him, and maybe if I interrogated him, I could get some info. But he always looks younger. He always looks like 18 or 19. I look a bit younger. My other living brother looks a bit younger. So how come we're all looking younger, but some of my relatives still look much older? So why wouldn't they all be looking in their 20s? And so the rod spelled out a pretty short and sweet answer. It says, it's because living very spiritually makes new that which is old. And it's always nice receiving just a crystal clear message like that. So my question I first had, and first of all, this connected some dots in my head. It means that people living on that side who are not yet living in a more spiritual way, in a more giving, kind, loving way, they're not going to age regress. And what she goes on to say was that when you first cross over, you will look the same age as you did immediately, but there's a process that takes place. I think I'll talk about that in a moment. I asked, can this have an effect on this density? And the answer is yes. And I ask, is this why Betty White in her 90s looks so young while George Soros looks like a wrinkled old Sith Lord? And she says yes, that is why some people in this density who have have love in their hearts and their personalities match what we would call a spiritual way of living, why they tend to have more vitality and youth and health than other people. It's the same process happening on a subtle level to our bodies here. So those of you looking to stay young or become younger, maybe hold off on the facelift and think about changing your philosophy and mental habits so that it starts age regressing you the natural way. I ask, on the fifth density, which is what we would call the middle astral level, the realm that is especially Earth-like, it's not where my guide is the effect instantaneous? And I also asked, is on the 6th density, is the effect instantaneous? Even on her density, the effect of age regression, she says, is not instantaneous. I say, so if I cross over in my 90s, will I first appear the same age I crossed? Yes, it matches up with my astral experiences. I say, but if I treat everyone with love and I am low stress, very happy, I will begin to age regress. The answer is yes. How long does this process take? And this is key. She says a couple months usually. People are like, but there's no time on the other side. There's no such thing as months. Well, there are. That's, for the most part, a misinterpretation. There is a perception of time being either sped up or everything kind of blending in. And yet, as soon as you think about time, time is back. And like, well, what did I do yesterday? What was I doing? What am I going to do next month? It's almost like when you're having fun and time just passes very quickly, or everything blends in. That's kind of again, I added that as a higher vibratory level of being. And that happens, but it doesn't mean that months don't exist. It doesn't mean that days don't exist. So that's about it for that communication. So a couple more thoughts. So in this case, on that side, beauty is not skin deep. On this side, it can be, but it can also not be. Someone who is biologically very young, I should say in their 20s, they tend to look more youthful and more beautiful. Even if someone has a rotten personality, the biology will circumvent that. I think as we get older, if our hearts are full of bitterness and anger and a lot of issues, unfortunately, it's going to reflect more and more in our appearances, and we're not going to age so well. And this seems to be the unfortunate reality about this. On the flip side, if we can keep more love in our hearts, we will physically age less, because that which is spirituality makes new that which is old. Which means even if someone is already old and they begin practicing certain ways of living, thinking, philosophy, and inner peace, happiness, kind of like, living in what we call the spiritual way, then it's possible that even in this plane you will begin age regressing. But on this world, it's much more subtle, much less apparent than on the 5th density, and on the 6th density it's even more apparent. So this is why people encounter truly angelic beings who are like beautiful beyond almost beyond description. Is the more refined you become in your soul, actually the more physically beautiful you become. In this world, because it's so material, someone could theoretically look very beautiful but have a rotten personality. And those of us who are empathic, though, we can sniff that out. So if we meet someone who looks very beautiful, we can get a bad vibe, and it's not going to fool us. But for many people, it will. And you can also get fooled by photographs. So I think that's a very important point. So here it can be skin deep, and there's also obviously genetic factors as well. What I am aware of is that this affects anything, even certain defects that maybe shouldn't be there. Or those defects will switch over from being something that seems like it's improper and shouldn't be there, and it will actually kind of meld into someone's beautiful representation. All right, look at this nice moth that just landed on my middle finger. I wonder if this is my guide saying hello. So one of the things that they can do is control insects very easily. So literally, most people, whether it's 5th or 6th density people, they can take an insect and then basically take control of it. And they use that sometimes to make signs and to communicate. And so very likely, like a moth just flies out of nowhere and just lands on my middle finger while I'm talking. Probably it could have been Lorena, could have been somebody else. But it's a fun thing that they do. It's also the type of after-death contact that we can expect to experience sometimes. But anyway, now my thoughts got hijacked a little bit. So the main point is that in all circumstances, if you're living a spiritual life and you're full of love and happiness, then you're gonna start to look very beautiful. But if the opposite is true, it's gonna wear on you. So my relatives and a lot of people on that fifth density, unfortunately, bringing over the same habits, same thought patterns, the same lifestyle as here. Many who want to start looking younger realize they have to do the inner work to be able to get to that point. Although it's maybe possible to supersede it with some kind of technology they have over there. They probably have much better facelifts than they do here. But most people don't even, go down that road. They just stick to what they're comfortable with. And they may continue to look quite old, or they'll age regress to an extent, or even to what they're comfortable with. So some people actually are comfortable looking older. Some people are comfortable, being a wiser, having an older person's appearance, and that's also perfectly fine, in which case you will not age regress if you don't want to. Finally, people who are born there, regardless, seem to stop aging at a certain point, usually the 30s. And this is almost an act of physiology and biology on that side, so people can expect who are children will basically stop aging at a certain point, and they just won't age further than that. So there's a lot more I could probably talk about this, including my experiences and the ages of people that I meet there and what people say about this. But I will say that generally speaking, I notice when you're on that side, I've been to places where there's an unusual amount of like elderly people, like a big retirement home. And I think these are a lot of people who cross over, but they just completely stick to their habits and are not even aware of how to move beyond those. And there's also places where it's like everyone looks really, really good, which is sometimes funny to be around. Everyone looks hot. And so I've experienced both sides of that spectrum. Anyway, get involved at Afterlife Topics Metaphysics on Facebook to discuss some of these things, or reach out to me personally. I do consultations for people one-on-one for help with any of these topics. So my email's in the description down below. And or become a patron at patreon.com/afterlifetopics or afterlifetopics.com/university. Join our private discussions, join our private meetings, guest interviews, and unlimited one-on-one time with me. That's at the $30 level if you want to become a patron. So thank you for watching this video, and hope that this was interesting to you. I'll see you guys on the next video.